Welcome, dear listeners, to our scary stories, where your darkest nightmares take form. Prepare yourself as we peel back the veil of reality and step into the dust-covered streets of a town under siege. In tonight's tale, echoes of the Undead Outlaw will dance with death, witness the resurrection of a legendary gunslinger, and come face to face with the chilling power of an ancient witch. Now, settle in, hold your breath. Let the story unfold. A bitter gust of wind blew through the desolate streets of the unnamed town. Sun-baked wooden buildings stood haphazardly, their paint chipped and faded from years of relentless sun. Ghostly echoes of laughter and gunshots resonated in the empty air, absorbed by the dusty cobblestone paths and the scarred wood of the saloon. The town smelled of arid dirt, worn leather, and faded hopes, the smell of a place forgotten by time and by men. At the outskirts, with its back turned to the town as though in silent condemnation, was a shanty dwelling that stood in defiance of the elements. This was Agatha's home, an isolated sanctuary for a pariah. She was as much a part of the town as the unforgiving desert itself, wrinkled, weather-beaten, yet enduring. The air grew colder near her home, and the coppery scent of fresh herbs and arcane potions lingered around it. The townsfolk, resolute in their fear and superstition, avoided crossing paths with Agatha. Her hollowed, stormy eyes and matted gray hair were a stark contrast to the bright desert colors. Her twisted fingers, stained by years of potion-making, would clutch a gnarled staff, its ominous presence adding to the aura of dread that the town associated with her. Her harsh, crackled voice was seldom heard, except for when she murmured chants to the moonlight. To the east of Agatha's home, away from prying eyes, lay the derelict graveyard. It was a barren stretch of land, adorned only by decaying wooden crosses that marked the graves of forgotten gunslingers. At the very edge of this forsaken place was a grave apart from the rest, marked not by a wooden cross, but by an obsidian tombstone. Beneath, it held the legendary Bartholomew Bart Black, a man whose shadow had once eclipsed the sun over the town. A once virtuous lawman turned outlaw, Bart's life was a tragic ballad of love lost, revenge, and redemption that ended in a hail of gunfire. His death had been a spectacle, the culmination of a bloody feud that left the town scarred and Bart beneath the cold desert soil. Even in death, his name echoed ominously, a chilling reminder of a time the town wished to forget but never could. In the solitude of her home, under the whispering desert wind, Agatha hunched over a bubbling cauldron. Her sharp eyes flickered with determination as she dropped the final ingredient into the murky concoction, a lock of Bart's hair, procured under a waning moon. The cauldron's contents shivered, then exploded into a mesmerizing flare of violet light that reflected eerily in her expectant gaze. The ritual had begun. The once static air was now filled with a pulsating energy, swirling around Agatha in a cyclone of suppressed anticipation. Fear and thrill danced in the corners of her eyes as she envisioned the ensuing chaos. The town that shunned her would soon learn the consequence of their transgressions, a lesson taught from beyond the grave. As Agatha whispered the final words of her forbidden incantation into the chilling wind, the ground under Bart's grave began to tremble, and the air thickened with an unseen terror. Far away in the town, the echo of an old gunshot filled the air, ringing the death knell of the peace that had once reigned. Something was coming. Something undead. The indigo canvas of the night sky was punctuated by the cold stare of a million distant stars, casting an eerie luminescence upon the desolate graveyard. The wind whispered anxiously through the tombstones, carrying with it the heavy scent of the earth's anticipation. At the outskirts, standing starkly against this barren landscape, Agatha held her staff aloft, her heart pounding in tandem with the rhythm of the ritual. Within the belly of the earth, underneath the obsidian tombstone, a tremor resonated. The ground was disrupted, casting aside centuries of hardened soil, as if exhaling a long-held breath. A ghastly hand, skeletal and rotting, punctured the surface, clawing into the chilled air of the desert night. It was a sight of gruesome rebirth, a monstrous parody of life returned where it was meant to stay extinguished. Bart Black, the legendary outlaw, was no more a man. He was now a dreadful apparition, a twisted mockery of his former self. His once sparkling blue eyes were now hollow pits of endless black. His skin, leathery and decayed, clung desperately to his skeletal frame. The handsome gunslinger who once spurred tales of heroism was now the horrifying embodiment of the undead. As Bart rose from the depths of his grave, the world around him seemed alien. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long, foreboding shadows that danced like specters. The sweet, familiar scent of desert flowers was replaced by the stench of his own decay, and the cold smell of the grave. He felt the coarse dirt beneath his bare feet and the harsh wind tugging at his ragged clothes. Agatha stood a few feet away, her gnarled hands clutching the talisman that now bound the undead gunslinger to her. She shivered, not from the biting cold, but from the pure, unadulterated power that now stood before her. His ghastly visage made even her old, weathered heart beat faster in a mix of fear and exhilaration. In the heart of the town, an inexplicable dread washed over the sleeping inhabitants. They tossed and turned in their slumber, their dreams haunted by the phantom echoes of gunfire and a bone-chilling wind. Dogs whimpered, horses neighed, and the night itself held its breath, as though the very air was saturated with an ancient, creeping fear. Bart's hollow gaze turned toward Agatha, his body reacting to the pull of her dark magic. The whispers of the incantation lingered between them, binding them together like an unholy contract. Agatha's voice, previously harsh and cracked, now resonated with an uncanny power. She commanded, and Bart, against the remnants of his own will, obeyed. The twisted journey of vengeance had commenced, their dreadful alliance sealed under the watchful eyes of the waning moon and the restless spirits of the desert. The first rays of dawn stretched out over the horizon, timidly illuminating the town with a light that seemed too pure for the events of the preceding night. Bartholomew Bart Black stood at the outskirts, the morning sun casting a long, eerie shadow that seemed to seep into the very soul of the town. In his undead state, Bart felt no warmth from the sun. Instead, a strange chill ran through his skeletal frame, a reminder of the grave's eternal cold. Agatha, on the other hand, stood a safe distance away, watching as Bart experienced the sun's light in his undead state. The witch's lips curled into a cruel smile as she clutched her talisman, a constant reminder of the power she held. The warmth of the rising sun did little to lessen the coldness in her eyes. Inside Bart's decayed form, something stirred. His past began to resurface, bleeding into his present like a faded black and white photograph. Memories of hot lead and cold steel, of love lost and vengeance sought, rushed back to him in fragmented flashes. He remembered the town's people, their faces a mix of fear and respect. He saw his own reflection in a grimy mirror, the handsome face of a man caught between law and lawlessness. And he felt a heart that once beat passionately within his chest, now silent and cold. Yet as these fragments of a life once lived filled his mind, Bart was not his own master. He was a puppet dancing on the strings of Agatha's dark magic. Each pull of her talisman sent a jolt through him, a painful reminder of his servitude. In the town, the townsfolk awoke from a night of uneasy dreams. An undercurrent of anxiety ran through them as they performed their morning routines, unable to shake off the sense of dread that had crept into their homes in the dead of the night. The animals, too, seemed skittish, reacting to an unseen threat that hung heavily in the air. Meanwhile, Bart's reacquaintance with his past was interrupted by Agatha's harsh command. The witch had begun her day of reckoning, and Bart was her instrument. Bound to her will, he could only watch as his undead hands performed acts of terror against the town that had once been his home. His eyes reflected the silent screams of his soul, drowning in the dark depths of his servitude. Each act of terror painted a vivid picture of chaos and anarchy in the once peaceful town. Agatha reveled in this chaos, her vengeful heart finding a perverse pleasure in the town's despair. Her laughter echoed through the deserted streets, a chilling soundtrack to the horrors unfolding. By the time the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red, Bart had driven the town to madness. His legend was reborn, not as the daring gunslinger, but as the Undead Outlaw. Agatha's reign of terror had begun, and the town found itself under the chilling gaze of the undead. The echoes of the dark past had turned into a horrifying reality, and the nightfall promised only more terror. As night cloaked the town in its suffocating shroud, the bright stars that once served as a beacon of hope now bore silent witness to the nightmare that had taken hold. Bart, the undead outlaw, stood tall amidst the chaos, an ominous silhouette against the cold black sky. His hollow eyes mirrored the chaos and despair around him, a grotesque tableau of burning houses, terrified townsfolk, and a town lost to fear. Agatha, shrouded in shadows, reveled in the pandemonium she'd orchestrated. Her once isolated home was now the epicenter of fear, a puppet master's stage where each scream and plea from the townsfolk served as macabre music to her ears. The acrid smell of burning wood mixed with the metallic tang of fear hung heavy in the air, a sickening perfume that announced the witch's reign. The once bustling town had been reduced to a terrified whisper of its former self. Homes that once held warmth and laughter now stood empty, their occupants either hiding in fear or driven to madness. The once lively tavern was now a ghostly structure, its cheerful clamor replaced with an eerie silence that was broken only by the occasional gust of wind slamming a loose shutter against the weather-beaten exterior. In the heart of the town, Mayor Hopkins trembled. The proud man who once held the town's reins now felt powerless. The mayor's grand house, which usually smelled of polished wood and expensive tobacco, was now filled with the sour stench of fear. He could hear the distant echoes of Agatha's laughter and the terror-stricken cries of his town. Every nerve in his body screamed for action, yet the paralyzing dread held him tight in its icy grasp. Hopkins remembered Agatha, the old witch who was often the subject of hushed whispers and terrified glances. He remembered Bart, too, the man who once walked the thin line between a hero and an outlaw. Now the pair were united in a ghastly alliance, turning the town into a living nightmare. Bart continued his rampage through the town under Agatha's control. The outlaw's ghostly form would appear and disappear, much like a dreadful wisp of smoke. He moved with an unholy grace, his skeletal form casting chilling shadows that danced with the flickering flames engulfing the town. Yet, in the chaos, glimpses of Bart's torment flickered through. Each act of terror committed by his hand was a blow to his soul, trapped within his undead form. His heart, once full of love and vengeance, now lay silent and broken, mirroring the town he was being used to destroy. As the night wore on, Agatha's reign of terror showed no signs of relenting. The once vibrant town was now a fearful shell of its former self, each heartbeat echoing the dread of the horrifying specter that had been unleashed upon them. The first chapter of their nightmare had been written, and as the moon bore witness, it was far from over. Dawn crept across the horizon, the reluctant sun casting a pallid light over the town. Bart Black's haunting figure receded into the shadowy outskirts, drawn away by Agatha's command. The witch, satisfied with the terror inflicted during the night, retreated to her dark dwelling. A chilling quietude fell over the town, a brief respite before the ghastly cycle would start anew. In the heart of the town, Mayor Hopkins finally found the courage to step outside his home. The destruction that greeted him was overwhelming. Smoldering houses, deserted streets, the echo of screams still resonating in the wind. Yet, amidst the chaos and fear, a spark of resilience flickered in the mayor's heart. This was their town, their home, and they could not let it fall into the hands of the vengeful witch and her undead puppet. News of a meeting at the town hall spread through hushed whispers and desperate eyes. Despite the dread gripping their hearts, a few brave souls emerged from their hiding places, drawn by a glimmer of hope. It was a meager gathering, their numbers dwindling under the relentless reign of terror. Yet, each one was fueled by the courage of desperation and the determination to reclaim their home. Inside the town hall, Hopkins addressed the scared townsfolk. His voice trembled, but there was an undeniable resolve in his words. The familiar smell of aged timber and parchment filled the room, a small comfort against the overwhelming fear. The mayor's plan was dangerous and fraught with uncertainty, but it was a glimmer of hope against the tide of despair. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the town, Bart was locked in an internal struggle. His consciousness was drowned in a sea of despair and guilt, echoing the destruction his undead hands had wreaked. He felt a heart-wrenching tug as he thought of the townsfolk, their terrified faces a stark contrast to the respect and awe they once held for him. The handsome outlaw was now a harbinger of chaos and fear. Agatha watched over Bart, her eyes reflecting the cruel satisfaction of her vendetta. She was oblivious to Bart's struggle, believing her control over him to be absolute. Her vengeful heart beat in rhythm with the ominous thrumming of her talisman, a dreadful symphony that was yet to reach its crescendo. As the day wore on, a sense of unity took root amidst the fear. The townsfolk started preparing, each task a defiant stand against the terror that awaited them at nightfall. The once abandoned streets saw fleeting moments of activity as a dangerous plan took shape. The air was heavy with the stench of burnt wood, the bitter taste of fear, and an audacious whisper of hope. This day was a battle against time, a race to fortify their town before nightfall. It was a testament to their courage and determination. The townsfolk clung to each other, their unity serving as a beacon of light in their darkest hour. And even as fear threatened to drown them, their spirits refused to falter, for they knew this was just the beginning of their fight against the Undead Outlaw and his witch master. As dusk fell, the sun seemed to retreat hastily, leaving the town bathed in the gloom of uncertainty. The eerie quiet of twilight was disrupted only by the muffled sound of footsteps and whispered prayers. Across the deserted streets and in the shadows of their homes, the townsfolk readied themselves for the impending siege of the night. Bart emerged once again under the witch's control, a foreboding figure against the rapidly darkening skyline. He was the silent storm on the horizon, the terrifying specter that would unleash terror under the witch's commands. His skeletal form cast eerie silhouettes, a dance of death with the rapidly encroaching darkness. Back in the town hall, Mayor Hopkins cast one final glance over the courageous faces before him. Each held a story of loss and dread, but within their eyes also lay a glimmer of hope and an unyielding spirit. Hopkins felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. His heart pounded in his chest like a drum rallying soldiers to war. Their plan was a dangerous gamble, and the night ahead promised to be long and terrifying. Agatha, ensconced within her dark dwelling, began the night's symphony of terror. Her talisman throbbed with malevolent energy, the pulsating rhythm a chilling soundtrack to the unfolding nightmare. Her cruel laughter filled the air, a bone-chilling harmony that reverberated across the desolate landscape. In response to her commands, Bart moved through the town, his actions a twisted mirror of his past. Each footfall echoed ominously, a ghostly drum heralding the onset of terror. Yet, amidst the horror, Bart's human spark flickered. His consciousness, though submerged in despair, sought redemption amidst the fear he was forced to instill. As Bart unleashed terror under the witch's control, the townsfolk fought back. Their resistance was a beacon in the face of overwhelming darkness. Fear was momentarily pushed aside by courage, as they used their knowledge of the town's nooks and corners to their advantage. From the blacksmith's strong arm and the innkeeper's keen eyes to the seamstress' nimble fingers, and the mayor's resolute leadership, every skill was utilized in their desperate stand. From the safety of her shadowy dwelling, Agatha watched the town's defiance unfold. A flicker of irritation crossed her face as the once cowering townsfolk dared to resist her reign of terror. Yet her confidence remained unshaken. She was certain that her undead puppet and her dark magic would eventually quell their resistance. The night stretched on, each moment a test of courage and determination. Bart, under Agatha's influence, continued his dreadful parade, yet the resolve of the townsfolk remained undeterred. Each act of resistance added a new verse to the tale being woven under the starless night. The town, once on the verge of surrender, had become a fortress of resistance, staging a desperate siege against the night's terror. With the break of dawn, Bart's haunting presence receded, leaving behind a town shrouded in destruction, yet flickering with defiant resilience. Mayor Hopkins, despite the deep circles under his eyes, wore an expression of gritty resolve. The plan, though far from perfect, had proven effective against the Undead Outlaw. Yet, the question that gnawed at his weary mind was how to tackle Agatha, the puppeteer pulling the strings. The witch was a formidable foe, her dark magic and control over Bart a chilling reality they had to face. As the sun lazily ascended the sky, casting long, hesitant shadows around the scarred town, Hopkins knew they needed to delve into the past for answers. Their quest led them to Abigail, the town's elderly librarian. A figure often lost behind towering stacks of books and rolls of parchments, Abigail was a treasure trove of local lore and forgotten tales. She had often been the source of fascinating stories for the town's children, weaving tales of legendary outlaws, brave sheriffs, and the occasional eerie witch story. Today, her knowledge was their beacon of hope in the enveloping darkness. As the townsfolk gathered in the library, the scent of aged textbooks and time-worn wood filled the air. Abigail, with her spectacles perched precariously on her nose, rummaged through dusty records and brittle pages in search of anything about the witch. The room was tense, each person holding their breath as they hung on to the old librarian's every word. Meanwhile, at the edge of town, Bart's undead form lay dormant. Underneath the layers of deathly calm and dark magic, Bart's spirit was embroiled in a relentless struggle. His human side yearned for the man he once was, the charismatic gunslinger who had lived on his own terms. His consciousness felt the weight of every terrified scream, every tear of despair, each a bitter reminder of the terror he was forced to wield. Back at the library, Abigail finally found a parchment detailing Agatha's past. As she read out loud, the townsfolk listened in rapt attention. The tale painted a portrait of Agatha before her descent into darkness, tracing her transformation from a misunderstood outsider to a vengeful witch. The story also hinted at her source of power, the talisman she wore around her neck, a focus for her dark magic. As the echoes of the past filled the room, Mayor Hopkins could see a glimmer of hope in the faces around him. Armed with this knowledge, they now had a strategy against Agatha. A plan began to take form, a daring plot that targeted the very heart of Agatha's power, her talisman. The day, drenched in the harsh light of revelations and the musky scent of old lore, ended with a newfound determination. As the townsfolk returned to their homes, their hearts pounded with a mix of fear, anticipation, and a flicker of hope. The stage was set for a daring confrontation, a fight that would decide the fate of their town. Evening draped the town in hues of burnt orange, the horizon a poignant painting of their struggle. In the darkening shadows of the town hall, Mayor Hopkins, the blacksmith, and a handful of courageous townsfolk gathered, their faces set in grim determination. The plan to disrupt Agatha's control over Bart and steal her talisman was perilous, but they knew the stakes. It was their town and their lives they were fighting for. Under the disappearing light, they meticulously went over their strategy. The blacksmith, with his brute strength, would engage Bart, while a nimble and silent young lad named Tom was chosen to infiltrate Agatha's dwelling. Tom was a simple farmhand, but was known for his agility and quick wits, traits that made him their best chance at this daring task. Away from the hushed tones and scheming minds, the rest of the town held its breath, waiting for the onslaught of nightfall. The saloon was a sanctuary for the weary souls seeking solace in hushed conversations, and the familiar smell of old oak and stale ale. Despite the underlying fear, there was a sense of unity, of shared courage that held the townsfolk together. Meanwhile, the sun sank below the horizon, surrendering the sky to a blanket of starless darkness. Bart, under the witch's wicked influence, rose once again, a spectral figure against the somber landscape. The town, once bustling with life and laughter, stood eerily still, awaiting the terror that lurked in the twilight. Simultaneously, Agatha stirred in her dwelling, her talisman pulsating with ominous energy. She could sense the defiance simmering within the town, their feeble resistance a minor distraction in her grand plan. Little did she know that tonight would bring an unexpected twist to her vendetta. As the night crept in, Bart began his ominous procession through the town, and Tom embarked on his dangerous mission. His heart pounded in his chest like a runaway horse, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The scent of damp earth and the cool breeze carried a sense of dread, yet also a desperate whisper of hope. The plan was set into motion, the pieces moving in a deadly dance with fate. Unbeknownst to the menacing outlaw and his puppeteer, the town held its breath in a silent prayer, each soul hoping for the safety of the young lad and the success of their daring plot. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the night air hummed with anticipation. The looming dusk promised a confrontation, the outcome of which would shape the destiny of their beleaguered town. The moon, a voyeur in the sky, watched as the night unfurled its twisted script. Bart, under Agatha's control, moved like a phantom through the deserted streets, his ghastly presence a stark contrast to the once vibrant town. As he drew near the town square, the blacksmith stepped forth from the shadows, steel in his eyes mirroring the makeshift weapon in his grasp. The blacksmith charged at Bart, his thunderous battle cry echoing in the silent night. Bart, under the witch's command, met the challenge, his otherworldly strength a match to the blacksmith's might. Their clash rang out in the still night, a grim symphony of their high-stakes duel. Simultaneously, Tom navigated the outskirts of town towards Agatha's dwelling, guided by the eerie glow of the witch's abode. His pulse thrummed in his ears, a relentless drumbeat mirroring the peril of his mission. As he approached the house, he could see Agatha, a silhouette against the flickering light, her focus on the talisman and her undead marionette. Silent as a shadow, Tom inched closer to the witch. His every step was a dance with danger, his heart pounding a frenzied rhythm. The smell of rotting wood and the undercurrent of potent herbs filled his nostrils, the tactile details a grim reminder of the reality of his task. Meanwhile, back in the town square, the duel between Bart and the blacksmith continued, each blow echoing their desperate struggle. Despite Bart's supernatural prowess, the blacksmith held his ground, his strength and courage a beacon in the enveloping darkness. Just as Tom was within reach of the witch, Agatha sensed his presence. With a swift movement, she turned, her eyes flashing dangerously. In that split second, Tom lunged forward, his hand reaching for the pulsating talisman. Their struggle was swift and fierce, the room suddenly charged with an electrifying energy. Back at the town square, the blacksmith, sensing an opportunity, dealt a decisive blow, temporarily disorienting Bart. The undead outlaw staggered, a sign that Tom's mission was affecting Agatha's control. Inside the witch's dwelling, Tom wrestled the talisman away from Agatha. As he broke contact, the room fell into darkness. Bart, suddenly free from Agatha's control, collapsed on the town square, his form flickering uncertainly under the moonlight. With the stolen talisman in hand, Tom sprinted out of the dwelling, leaving behind an enraged witch. As he made his way back, he could hear the townsfolk's jubilant cheers cut through the night. The town square came into view, and in its center lay Bart, no longer a tool of terror, but a spectral cowboy caught in the witch's curse. The clash of shadows ended as dawn started to break, a glimmer of light piercing the horizon. Their town stood resilient, a testament to their courage and unity. Though their victory was significant, they knew the final confrontation was yet to come. Agatha, robbed of her talisman but not her witchcraft, would strike back. As the sun began to wash away the remnants of the tumultuous night, the townsfolk prepared for the dawn of their last stand. The morning arrived, a reluctant witness to the climax that was about to unfold. The sun's hesitant rays bathed the town, casting long, sprawling shadows that danced upon the walls of the buildings. The scent of gunpowder still lingered in the air, mixing with the raw, earthy smell of the morning. The townsfolk, though exhausted, found their spirits bolstered by the breaking day and their small victory. Inside the town hall, Mayor Hopkins, Tom, the blacksmith, and the others huddled around the stolen talisman, its pulsating energy now a weapon in their hands. In their hearts, they carried a mixed brew of apprehension, hope, and determination. Their plan had worked so far, but the final battle with Agatha was imminent. The silence of the morning was broken by the resonating sound of a horse's hooves against the cobblestone path. Agatha, astride a black steed, emerged from the fringes of the town. Her eyes blazed with vengeance, and her screams, amplified by her wrath and magic, echoed across the town. "Return what you stole, or face my wrath." Despite the echoing threat, the townsfolk stood their ground, their resolve strengthening against the face of their adversary. Mayor Hopkins, stepping forward, held the talisman high. "Agatha, your reign of terror ends today." With a bellow of rage, Agatha charged toward them, her magic crackling around her like a tempest. The townsfolk braced themselves, ready to stand against the coming onslaught. In that moment, something unexpected happened. Bart, the spectral cowboy who had been lying dormant, rose once again. This time, however, he was not a puppet to the witch's bidding. His spectral eyes glowed with a renewed sense of purpose. He had once been a fearsome gunslinger, a legend in his own right, and now he would reclaim that legacy. With supernatural speed, Bart intercepted Agatha's charge, his ethereal form standing tall between the witch and the townsfolk. A gasp echoed through the crowd as they watched the spectral cowboy face the enraged witch. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, every heart pounding in unison as the final stand began. Bart and Agatha clashed in the center of the town, their battle a whirlwind of spectral light and dark magic. With each parry and thrust, the townsfolk watched as their once terror, now turned savior, battled the malevolent witch. The struggle reached its peak when Bart, in a swift, ethereal move, disarmed Agatha, her magical energy disrupted. Seizing the moment, Mayor Hopkins rushed forward, thrusting the talisman at the witch. The talisman, recognizing its master, erupted in a brilliant light, engulfing Agatha. A chilling scream pierced the air as Agatha's form dissolved within the light, her dark magic finally overpowered by her own talisman. As the light dimmed, all that remained was the talisman, now dull and lifeless. Bart, his purpose fulfilled, gave a final nod to the townsfolk before fading away, his spectral form returning to the afterlife. With the witch's downfall, a cheer erupted among the townsfolk. Their town was finally free, the shadow of fear lifted. As the sun rose higher, bathing the town in its warm light, they gathered around the lifeless talisman, a symbol of their victory and unity. The final stand was over. The dusty western town had faced lawlessness, chaos, and a vengeful witch's wrath, yet emerged resilient. They had confronted their fears and stood unified against a dark force, their spirit and courage echoing through the legends of time. We've reached the end of our grim tale, dear listeners. The echoes of the Undead Outlaw may have faded, but the memory lingers, doesn't it? Every creak of the floorboard, every rustle of leaves in the wind. Could it be the spectral gunslinger on his eternal ride? Remember, even when the story ends, our fear always carries on. Until next time, sleep tight. And remember, the most chilling stories are always our scary stories. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.